To build a permanent, multi-generational city for 1 million people on the surface of Mars, planners are targeting a region known as Arcadia Planitia. The logistical constraints of this environment are severe. Transit from Earth takes 8 months one way. The atmosphere is extremely thin and entirely unbreathable, and emergency supply lines simply do not exist. Surviving these specific conditions requires absolute resource independence from the moment the first crews touch down. Constructing this off-world city demands a specific civil engineering logic, one first successfully tested 4.5 millennia ago. We are talking about the Indus Valley Civilization, specifically the ancient urban centers of Mohenjo-Daro and Dholavira. Dholavira was built in a hyper-arid, drought-prone expanse in what is now Gujarat, India. The physical isolation and extreme scarcity faced by its inhabitants mirror the resource problems awaiting us on Mars. The builders of the Indus Valley survived by engineering 3 distinct pillars of urbanism. First, closed-loop hydrology. Second, in-situ construction, and a functional utility grid. These pillars constitute the baseline requirements for establishing a permanent off-world settlement. Dholavira existed in an unforgiving climate, receiving less than 160 centimeters of rainfall over an entire year. The city survived through massive infrastructural buffering. They engineered a system capable of sustaining their entire population for a full year without a single drop of precipitation. They achieved this by constructing a series of dams across seasonal rivers, actively diverting the sparse runoff into 16 interconnected municipal reservoirs. These deep earthen basins, reinforced by high walls, allowed administrators to trap and channel water across the city based on strict municipal needs. The Arcadia region on Mars is the prime candidate for settlement for an identical reason. It sits above massive subterranean deposits of water ice. Before human crews ever arrive, the initial footprint will consist of autonomous robots dedicated entirely to drilling into the regolith, melting and filtering this ice. On a barren planet, resources branch out. Water is heavily routed for human hydration, but it also functions as a vital baseline chemical component for the city. This flowchart demonstrates electrolysis. The system splits the H2O molecule, routing the oxygen atoms directly into the habitat's life support systems for the crew to breathe. The remaining hydrogen combines with atmospheric carbon dioxide to synthesize methane rocket fuel. Producing this fuel locally is strictly mandatory. Hauling thousands of tons of return trip propellant across space from Earth is physically and economically impossible due to weight limits. In both the ancient reservoirs of Dholavira and the planned robotic processing plants on Mars, the entire urban layout is totally subservient to the centralized extraction, storage, and routing of water. Building an isolated settlement relies on a civil engineering concept called in-situ resource utilization, or ISRU. The physical limitation of spaceflight dictates that you cannot import massive steel beams or concrete across a 45-day nuclear or 8-month chemical transit. The Indus Valley engineers bypassed complex supply chains by using what was immediately available. They excavated local dirt and fired it into standardized burnt bricks. By utilizing this single, repeatable modular unit, they rapidly scaled their settlements, constructing a massive 500-acre urban center at Mohenjo-Daro. Martian colonists face a severe chemical complication with their local dirt. The regolith covering the planet is laced with toxic compounds known as perchlorates. To solve this, researchers are developing a scalable ISRU material called astrocrete, also referred to as biocrete. Astrocrete is synthesized by taking that sterile Martian soil and binding it together using the urea and proteins found in human bodily waste. While unconventional, extracting binders from human sweat and urine creates a material that demonstrates superior structural compression strength compared to standard terrestrial concrete. But structural strength only solves the gravity problem. The thin Martian atmosphere fails to block lethal cosmic radiation from the sun. To protect the population, engineers are planning a structure called the Martian Ice Dome. It utilizes locally mined water ice injected into a thick mold, acting as an optimal radiation shield. The design features an inflatable inner core to maintain a pressurized living space, completely encased in a dense, translucent shell of frozen water. True multiplanetary sustainability relies on mastering the ancient art of sourcing materials locally and standardizing them for rapid, predictable expansion. If we compare Mohenjo-Daro to concurrent settlements in ancient Egypt or Mesopotamia, the architectural priorities are starkly different. The Indus Valley sites feature a glaring absence of state-centric ornamental architecture. There are no grand palaces, no royal tombs, and no massive temples. They engineered their cities for strict egalitarian utility. Up to 40,000 citizens lived in highly structured mathematical grid blocks. The pinnacle of this utility was their city-wide drainage system. Nearly every home featured a designated bath and toilet. Wastewater was routed out of individual homes and flowed directly into covered street drains. It represents an unparalleled focus on centralized public health over individual luxury. An off-world city has zero margin for error. The environment strictly prohibits organic, sprawling, disorganized growth. Martian survival demands a strict node-based grid to safely route highly pressurized life support systems. Every structure must integrate into interconnected utility lines that distribute filtered oxygen, manage heat, and pipe human waste to automated centers where it is recycled into agricultural fertilizer. This grid must also manage a critical power constraint. Solar panels generate zero electricity during the 12-hour Martian night, meaning life support depends entirely on centralized battery distribution. Keeping a million-person city pressurized and heated through the dark requires thousands of massive industrial-scale energy storage units, tightly networked into the settlement's foundation. When environmental lethality is high, survival dictates a hyper-efficient, centralized functional grid over aesthetic urban design. A self-sustaining Mars colony functions as a holistic, closed-loop municipal system. Its survival is governed by the principles of municipal civil engineering, moving beyond the localized life support of a traditional space station. We can observe the inherent vulnerability of any closed-loop system by looking at the ultimate fate of Mohenjo-Daro. Despite its brilliant engineering and mathematical precision, the city collapsed and was entirely abandoned after roughly 600 years. The leading archaeological theory points to a shift in the path of the river. That single change destroyed their primary hydrological loop, and the city could no longer support its population. Colonists on Mars face the exact same physical constraints. A single failure in water recycling, the power grid, or the oxygen loop means total systemic collapse. Aerospace engineering provides the vehicle to cross the void between planets, but the destination requires an entirely different discipline. Advanced rockets and AI robots are merely transit tools. The actual survival of humanity off-world relies on executing the rigorous 4,500-year-old civic logic of the Indus Valley Civilization.